Okay, I think that works. Hey everybody, let me change my name and let me do this with the chat. Okay, that works. Hi, happy Oscar Sunday. I don't know why I get so nervous on Oscar Sunday. I have like literally nothing to be nervous about, but I don't know, I guess I get really excited. Cool. So if everybody, I know people are just coming in, we just hit 11 o'clock, but if you could just type in the chat box, which is right here, and say hi, tell me your deepest, darkest secret, maybe where you're from, just anything so I know that you guys can hear me and I'm not talking to myself. If you guys could just type in the chat box, that would be great. And also, so when, hi Michael. So when it gets time for questions, there's a Q&A box and then there's a chat box. In the Q&A box, that's when I tell you guys to, I'm gonna ask you to ask questions and type in questions. Make sure it's craft related questions. Yesterday, as you can imagine, a lot of the questions were, how do I get my script to you? I'm not gonna ask that question, but the question should be craft related, industry related, something that could help everybody on the call. And yeah, so it was a really awesome webinar yesterday. We had Katie Mullins from Netflix, we had Jordan Moldo from Baron Studios, and we had Courtney Shepard from New Republic. And it was so enlightening and inspiring. And I see a few people that were on yesterday are also on now, so that's great. So I hope you guys had a good time. Let me just check in the attendee box and make sure. So hi, Garrick's on, awesome. Hi, Howard, Howard's on too. There's two Michaels listed. It's an a Michael with a capital M and a Michael with a lowercase m. So I'm assuming that's Onofri and Shanker. So hopefully, because I want to promote you to panelists in a little bit. And cool. So a couple of things before we get started. This is going to go for about an hour and a half. I'm going to ask questions for the first 30 minutes or so. And then when I ask you all, it's going to start typing in your questions. You can type it in the Q&A box. Don't type the questions in the chat box. Make sure you type it in the Q&A box. Otherwise, I won't see it. And then at that point, when it's time to ask your questions, I'll ask them and then the panelists will answer them. So cool. So a couple of things before we get started. If you get our 10,000 emails a day, if you're friends with me on Facebook, you know that we were at 99 writers signed, which is insanity. We're one writer away of 100, if you can't do math. So we're really excited about it. We have so many amazing, insane things to offer. When we hit 100 writers signed, just open the window a little bit. So we're so close, and hopefully the next week or so, we'll hit 100 writers signed, which is insane. Just a couple of other, that also includes 8 writers signed in the past 8 weeks to places like Abrams Artists, Gotham Group, APA, so on and so forth. And some other recent success stories I'm super excited about is a producer that we work with, Nick Alexsky. He got pitched a project through our program with the shirt is all out of whack. Let me just fix this a little bit. He found a project that was pitched to him through our program, and he picked it up, and now it's getting greenlit by MGM. One of our writer's scripts is going into production this year, actually I think in the next couple of months, with the producer of The Irishman. And one of our other writers, top tier writer's script, just got optioned by Lionsgate with the director of John Wick attached to produce. And actually that writer has a free success story webinar on February 23rd at 4 p.m. through us. So if you go to our webinar section on our website, you'll see that one, and you can sign up for it. It's free. We do that often when we get a writer success and we want to like spotlight them for whatever reason. We'll have a free webinar. We try to do it every month. Just to hopefully inspire you all, because I know it's very frustrating. Sometimes when I say 99 writers signed or 80 writers signed, so on and so forth, I expect a lot of inspiring emails back. But a lot of the emails are like, what about me? This sucks. I want to be one of those people, which I totally get. But at the same time, you know, it's great that all these success stories are coming from the community, because you know we're doing something right. And so that's pretty much about it. And also, kind of this happened last year, but it's really exciting. So we partnered with New Republic last year. New Republic this year is nominated for 1917. They also produced Rocket Man, and last year we partnered with them, and they optioned the winning script last year. So hopefully they win this Best Picture today. That would be awesome. But so on and so forth. So we have 4 amazing people today, which I'm so excited about. One actually used to be my boss, and he is fantastic. So we'll go through, I'm going to promote each one to panelists, have them do a quick intro of themselves, and then we will just dive into the questions from there. Okay, so first off, I'm going to try to just get one of these Michaels, and hopefully it's one of the Michaels that are in the panel. So the first Michael is with an uppercase M. I want to promote you to panelist. And hopefully you're one of the Michaels. Hey, Michael.
Hey, Joey.
Hey, Shanker, right?
Yes.
How are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm good.
Can you hear me?
I hear you. I just sent you an invite to start your video, so that should start. There you are. Hi.
Hi.
How are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. I know you have friends over, so I thank you for doing this.
Yeah, no worries.
Sunday. And you're in New York or LA? I forgot.
I'm in LA, but I'm from New Jersey originally.
Oh, okay. Cool. Awesome. And Michael works at 30 West. And if Michael, if you want to tell everybody a little bit about you and your company, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, so I work at 30 West. It's a independent financier and advisory company started by Micah Green and some of his colleagues from CAA. So we're backed by Dan Friedkin, who also has a production company, Imperative Entertainment, that functions as our sister company. So we're sort of the financier to Imperative's projects, but then we're also an independent financier in the marketplace, just looking for kind of fully baked packages to put into production.
Can you imagine being so rich that you could just finance companies, finance movies? That's a dream.
And we finance the company Neon. They're not a part of our company, but we own Neon, and they have a Best Picture nominee tonight, Parasite.
Oh, that's so cool. Awesome. Yeah. Oh, well, good luck to you too. That's awesome.
Thank you.
I haven't seen Parasite yet. I do want to see it.
Oh, wow. You need to see it. Yeah.
I'm the only person who hasn't. I hear it's friggin' awesome, so I definitely want to see it. Cool. Then I'll do the next Michael with the lowercase m and put you to panelist. Oops, sorry, Michael, I muted you. Hey, Michael.
I can't see me, but I can see you. Is that correct?
Yeah, I just sent you an invite. So
there it is.
Yeah.
Oh,
hi. How are you?
All right, this is going to be confusing because there's the other Michael with glasses from New Jersey. So this might get confusing.
Where in New Jersey are you from?
Trenton.
Oh, I'm from northern New Jersey. So that's
the rich guys. All right.
You're from the capital.
I know. That's not saying much, but yes.
And Michael Onofri, he's also an amazing writer. He works at LD Entertainment. And I mean, like, it's looking really good.
For Renee?
Yeah.
Fingers crossed. You never, of course, want to count the chickens, but looking very good. Of course, if she wins and the other 3 win that have won everything, it'll be only the second time in Academy history that the same 4 actors won all 5 big awards. Like they swept everything.
Oh, wow. That's so crazy.
Yeah. So her, Brad, Laura Dern, and Joaquin, if they win, it'll be all 4 won all the big 5. Second time ever.
Wait, so all those people never won an Academy Award before is what you're saying? Or were you saying?
No, it'll be the second time that the same 4 actors won all the 5 big awards.
Oh,
so
that's
BAFTA,
so cool.
SAG, Critics' Choice. Yeah. And I think it was only a couple years ago. Yeah. So we'll see.
Oh, wow. I love it. I love the Santorini photo behind you too. I love that.
I can't. How did you? Wow. Okay. I didn't know how you figured that out, but yes, that is correct. Good eyes.
So Michael works at LD, like I said. If you want to tell everybody a little bit about you and LD.
So I've been at LD for, I don't even know, 7, 8 years. I started as an intern, then became a front desk person, then became an assistant to another assistant, and then now creative exec. And yeah, it's been, as Joe said, I'm a writer as well. So it's great to constantly be reading scripts and stealing from people and seeing what's selling. My company is more of a prestige company. We kind of do more art house, I would say. We're trying to veer away from that. But as you can see, Jackie, Judy, that's kind of what my upper CEOs, they spark to. So that's what we kind of delve into.
That's so cool. Oh my God, I'm crossing fingers.
Yes, me too.
That's so cool. Cool. So next we'll get Garrett Dion. Garrett, let me get you. Hey, Garrick.
Hello. How's
How
it
are
going?
you?
Good.
Good. Awesome. So, here, there you are. Awesome, awesome. So, Garrick and I have known each other for many, many, many years. We used to work together at Bold. He was my superior, and it was always fun, like just hearing him in the wings, talking about movies and TV and actors and filmmakers. Like he's such a film connoisseur that is so exciting to like see you just grow and work at so many amazing places. So, but I'm not gonna take your intro. If you want to tell everybody a little bit about yourself, that'd be cool.
Of course, thank you. And congrats on 99, about to be 100 writers, Joe. It's amazing. It really is, a landmark for sure.
Oh,
So congrats to you and Roadmap. So I've worked in development and some production. This is my 25th year. I just actually left Bronze Studios. I was there for about a little over 5 years. I was at Bold Films before that, where Joey and I worked together for about almost 7 years, and then a couple Warner Brothers based producers before that. I'm a writer as well. That's what I came out to LA to do, and that's what I'm focusing on at the moment. But as the second Michael said, I've spent a lot of time reading scripts, a lot of time, it's good and bad. You find out what can you borrow from, what works, what doesn't, what can I do better, but also you see a lot of tropes, you see a lot of trends, that kind of thing. So it is helpful for a writer for sure. So, yeah.
That's awesome. Cool. Awesome. And then last but not least, we have Howard Rosenman, who I've known, I think, probably the longest, and he is amazing. His stories are incredible. So let me promote you to panelist, Howard. Let's see if this works. Hey, Howard.
Using me?
I hear you. Let me just ask you to start your video. Hopefully that'll work.
Hold on. Start my video.
There you are. Hi.
Hi. How are you?
How are you feeling?
Much better. Much better. Still not 100%, but much better. I went to Israel 3 months ago to visit my sister, and I got sick, and I landed up in the hospital twice.
Yikes.
I finally came back here 6 weeks later. I ended up in the hospital again.
Oh,
But now I'm infection-free, and I had staphylococcus, and my heart's in sinus rhythm, and I'm okay.
okay. Good.
I'm 85% there.
Okay. And you just had a birthday too, so happy birthday. Happy belated. Now listen, Howard is an icon. He is a legend. He's produced, I mean, Buffy the Vampire Slayer, Father of the Bride, To Call Me By Your Name, which made me cry for like 3 months afterwards. He knows everybody. Everybody loves him. A story that I love to tell about Howard is I'm friends with Kevin Houvain, who's one of the partners of CAA, and he brought me to the premiere of Doubt. And everybody was trying to vie for Kevin's attention. And Kevin, is very polite and saying hi, just moving on. But when he saw Howard, he like literally opened his arms, like, Howard, how are you? It was just like, that's the kind of power and love that Howard exudes and just is very infectious. But Howard, if you want to tell everybody a little bit about yourself, that'd be great too.
As I told before, my parents are 7 generations born Israeli, and I come from a Hasidic background. Hasids tell stories. So storytelling is in my blood and my veins, and that's the only way I really know how to communicate. And so I started working for Katharine Hepburn. Leonard Bernstein introduced me to her. She was doing a play in New York called Coco, a musical. And then I worked on 2 other musicals. Then I wanted to learn film, and I didn't want to go to film school. So I went to an advertising agency, Benton and Bowles. Then 5 years later, I came out to Hollywood to make a television movie for Barry Diller, and I've made 43 movies since. Call Me By Your Name was an incredible experience because it won 204 awards, and it opened up so many doors for me, and it's like a miracle. And who I never in a million years would have thought it.
And maybe want to move to Italy like immediately after. It was so great. Somebody already put in the chat box, this is inspiring already. So yeah, it is. It's so inspiring. I love this. Cool. So let's jump right in. The time goes by so fast. So we'll jump right in. I want to ease into the more kind of development heavy questions with some easier ones. I always want writers to really understand the day-to-day of executives and producers, so they know how busy they are, they know where their attentions are kind of allotted to. So if you want to go around, and anybody could call out at any time, let's make sure everybody's unmuted. Yeah. And just kind of give me like a snapshot of like your day-to-day or your week-to-week even, like what your duties are, how many scripts you read.
I'll go first. Literally, I probably average a script a day. It's, we get 2-3 in a day, so we have to divvy them out. But, to keep up, we have to constantly be reading. So I'll definitely do one a day. There's probably at least one on the weekend, if it's not 2 or 3 for our weekend reads, but constantly reading. And if it's just not that, it's also looking at a director's reel, a director's film, a teaser. It's constantly taking in content to see, do we want to work with this person? Do we want to take this project on? So it's a constant influx of material. 2 hours at least a day in front of a computer, reading little words.
Cool. Anybody else? Day to day, week to week?
Yeah, I would add that mine is very similar. When I was doing this for so many years, and it went from when I started, I worked for Joel Silver, I worked for Denise Denovi, and I would read anywhere from 2 or 3 to 5 or 6 scripts in a day. It just depended. You have to understand, when I started, much like Michael who just spoke, I was an intern, and so I didn't know anyone, and I was so eager. You start with the sort of, we would put things in tiers as well. Things that come in from CAA obviously get read quickly, and it goes down the line from there. If it was a personal submission, et cetera. So you're always reading for sure. You're always reading writing samples, as Michael said, director samples as well. I'm always looking at competitive things. I'm reading things that, if we're working on a script about JFK, I'm reading, there's 3 other projects about JFK in the marketplace, so things like that. Or I spend a lot of time going back and looking at, if I'm doing a political thriller, one of the projects we're developing in-house, I'll spend a lot of time going back and watching All the President's Men, or something as recent as American Crime Story, things like that, to really, what is the best of the best. Sometimes I even look at what is the worst. You're always looking for things that are going to, sort of help you. So it is constant. And then meetings, of course. I mean, when I was at Braun recently, luckily we were pretty minimal for creative meetings, but we had 3 creative meetings a week that were anywhere from 1 to 3 hours about what we were reading, what we're going to read, what we had read, the notes that needed to be done on in-house projects. So there's very, very little downtime for just sitting and thinking and doing nothing.
Yeah. Yeah, it's work all the time. Cool. And then Howard, through when you started to today, how has your week to week changed? If any, if it has.
It hasn't really changed, because my day is all about breakfast, lunch, and dinner. I call it BLD. That's my job as a producer. In addition to reading 10, 15 scripts a week, in addition to watching reels, in addition to meeting the directors and the writers, and production designers and cinematographers, I have to do it all. And I go to the movies every single day. Every single day I see a movie. Whether it's because I'm in the Academy, I'm invited to Academy screenings. But my day consists of meetings with agents, meetings with managers, meetings with writers, meetings with lawyers, meetings with studio executives, meetings with production company executives. And I have my list of the 60 projects that I have that I'm juggling. And that's my life. Meetings, meetings, meetings.
That's awesome. I never want to leave my house, but when I hear that, I'm like, you're right. I have to go out and meet people face to face is so important. Howard once, I've known Howard for a while. He gave me advice a while back that it just so kind of impacted me a lot. Because when I came out here, I was like, I want to meet, be best friends with the Kevin Houvains and the Barry Dillers and try to hang out in that crowd. And he told me, it's fine to have those relationships, but make sure that you stay close to the people that you come up with. because those are the people that are going to have your back. Those are the people that are going to have the closest camaraderie with you as you grow up, grow up in the industry. And I thought that was really powerful. Cool. So let's go into the next question. Let's talk a little bit about development. Each of you have worked on obviously amazing projects. I would just like to know, like, generally, what's your development process like? So Michael, Shanker, I guess we can start with you. You get a script submitted to you. You think there's something there. From there, what's your development process? Do you go right to the writer? Do you go to your peers first and try to get their internal take?
My company is a little bit more unique, and my day-to-day is pretty similar to everyone else's in the sense that I'm reading about a script a day, but I'm reading less with development in mind, and I'm more reading to evaluate for production financing. So I'm not really reading people's samples necessarily, and I'm not really giving notes on the script. I'm kind of just making a yes or no determination based on the package and the script and the whole kind of big picture of it. Now, that being said, I do sometimes read scripts that are, unencumbered and don't have a package around them. And when I see something that's viable in that sense, I pass it to my sister company, Imperative, and then they'll give it a real evaluation for development purposes.
And then for you, that your company that likes the kind of a more of a package, I know, like, how can a writer know if they're attaching a director that is worthwhile? Like, is there a way for them to kind of gauge that?
Yeah, I would say, looking at their past few movies and how they performed and the type of talent they've been working with is the biggest determination in terms of what it would mean for a financing company.
Okay, cool. And then for Michael and Garrick, since you both are writers too, how does being a writer impact your development process?
Well, as a writer, let me say this. LD, kind of like still lower rung, we don't get, I would say, Oscar-worthy films in the script stages. We kind of come in later. I wish we got the chance that early on. So it's more when they're looking for financing or anything like that. So development-wise, it's tough. But when they're very close to production or just started, we were like, with Jackie, we were gap funders, and then we became on-set producers. If we were to pick a script that we felt was an Oscar-worthy contender, if we got that lucky to get in that early, it probably means it's a prestige piece and a drama. So we'd want a big name attached, not so much development, but of course, later down the line, we would want to make sure that if we're going to attach ourselves to this, there's a good chance it's going to go that far. So you want that big name attached. Development-wise, we haven't had the luck to be in that game yet. So hopefully next year I'll have more insight on that.
Cool.
Yeah, for me, I mean, being a writer, what I always say is what I try to offer is I've been on both sides of the desk. When I started, I was an intern and then an executive, and then I went away and I wrote for a bit. I worked on a movie called Walk to Remember, which the first Nicholas Sparks movie, and it was my first thing as a hired writer. So I really got a chance to see development on the other end, meaning we were in prep and I was having to use my own notes and our notes as a company and, include those in a short amount of time. But generally what I try to do is, and I think anybody who's, doing the jobs that we all do, you want to give helpful notes. And by that, I mean, not just make it funnier, make it scarier, make it bigger, make it less expensive, make it, try again. You want to always open up doors and windows is what I say. Meaning if a writer's doing a comedy, to their mind, they've come as far as they think they can come. It's as funny as it gets. And obviously if we're buying it, whatever company, we like it, we think it's funny. So it's about how do you implement notes? And for me, I just watch a lot of movies. I read a lot of books and scripts, and I just try to offer, I have a perspective. It's what I love about the project. It's what I, as an executive and as a moviegoer and as a thinker, think about the project and what it might need. And obviously my fellow executives, but come together and figure out, how do I give notes that aren't just bland, flat, that gives the writer no, there's no prescription. They just go, I don't know what to do with that. I mean, make it scarier. I already tried to make it as scary. So you're really about trying to get in and going, if I was a writer, what I try to lead a little bit of a path going, maybe something like this. I try not to also tell them what to do, because in some ways that is annoying for a writer. You don't want to just be, there is a writer, there is a sense sometimes of I'm under, a contract. I have to do it by this. I'll do what you want me to do. But basically I want to help them down a path or out a window or a door without telling them exactly what to do. And, it's not my panel, so I'm not going to spend all this time on it, but I have seen success with that. And I have had writers come back and go, I really love how thoroughly you showed me where I needed to go, rather than just go, try again, which I think sometimes there are people try to justify their position or their notes and just go, and there's no real meat or prescription behind it. And so that's what that's how I try to approach it.
I love that. And Howard, when you're reading a script, is there one element more than the others that you really look for the most, whether it's the hero's journey, dialogue, voice?
I can tell within the first 5 pages whether the writer has a voice, which I'm looking for. And if the writer has a voice, which is special, and if you don't know what I mean by voice, it's like, let's compare art. You can tell a Pablo Picasso a mile away, any of his paintings, okay? You could tell an Ed Ruscha. You could tell Rembrandt. They have a voice. Well, just like those artists have a voice, writers have a voice. In television, it's David Kelly and David Milch and Shonda Rhimes. So I look for that special thing that elevates the ordinary script to something that's going to be remarkable. Like Call Me by Your Name had a real voice.
Can you tell us a little bit how Call Me by Your Name got into your sphere?
15 years ago, I read a book called Out of Egypt that Andre Aciman had written about his Sephardic Alexandrian Jewish roots, about this epic story about this Jewish aristocratic family from like 1840 till they were kicked out in 1947 when Israel was formed. I wrote him a fan letter. Well, then I got a call 11 years ago while I was in the set of Milk, acting in Milk, from an Israeli friend of mine who was my best friend. He said, Andre Aciman just called me and said, you have to get this manuscript to Howard Rosenman. It has his name written all over it, gay Jew. So I read it, and it was like astonishing. And I started negotiating for the next day. That was 11 years ago.
Wow.
12 years now, maybe. And it went through many incarnations with several different writers. And it was the whole development process was dramatic over 11 years. Finally, Luca Guadagnino decided to do it, but when we hired Luca about 7 years ago, he was the location scout. And then he got more involved and became an executive producer. Then he got more involved and became a producer. Then he had those 2 big movies with Tilda Swinton. And then he and James Ivory decided to write it and co-direct it. They co-wrote it. And then James Ivory offered one of the parts to a friend of his without consulting Luca. Luca got crazy and didn't like that. And he said, I'm going to do this myself. So that's what happened.
Wow, that's so cool. I love that. So, and going back to, Garrick was saying you watch movies a lot. Howard, you say you watch movies a lot. I know the answer is probably obvious, but do you feel it's equally important, obviously, for execs to know the world of cinema, but do you think it's equally important for writers to always be going into movies, always be watching TV, knowing what's out there? Yeah, Onofri's giving the nod of approval.
I definitely think so. I think it's really important to be watching the top content that's out there, to just kind of see what's in the zeitgeist in the current moment, and also just to kind of see what the top writers are doing, what the top creators are doing, because you can learn a lot from them.
And just to stay in the conversation, I mean, if you're having a meeting with someone and they're referencing movie, TV, whatever it is, and you can't comment on it or know what they're talking about, it doesn't help. You want to be able to have that conversation piece, trade ideas. They know, you know what you're talking about. You have to be in the know constantly. And that's why constantly taking in content, no matter how it is, what it is. for a myriad of reasons.
Yeah. That went right through my head. So let me ask for, Garrick, you were talking before about your real in-depth way of giving notes, especially from a writer's perspective. What advice would you give a writer who's getting notes from an executive, regardless of the situation, that the exec isn't really being that thorough with the notes? Let's say in a real development process, you're working with an executive that maybe doesn't have the chops or whatever to really give those intricate notes. How much, and I think writers sometimes are afraid to ask questions or to kind of overstay their welcome. What advice would you give a writer who's kind of dealing with an exec that isn't giving really thorough notes, but the writer wants to keep working with the exec?
That's a really good question. That's a really good question. I would, as you're suggesting, first of all, let's assume that the writer, having gotten to where they are, does have a manager, and definitely use your manager. This is definitely a position where I've seen managers step in of trying to negotiate, like, hey, was he not clear enough? Trying to sort of negotiate, because I think a writer sometimes, they have a voice, but can they speak on their behalf? So yes, pressing for more clarity, but a manager could step in and go, hey, he came in and pitched again. Was there something that you were looking for? Trying to help with that. But the other thing is, it's tough because one of the best writers I ever worked with is Mark L. Smith, who wrote The Revenant. He wrote a movie called The Hole early on that Joe Dante directed for us. And he was always great at going, I think I know what you mean. And he would come back with a version or a couple. He would go, let me give you a couple options. Now that's a lot of work for a writer potentially to come up with, 3 different endings or 3 different ways out of this solution. But I think that is part of the process of being nimble as a writer. But a writer has to, protect themselves as well. So if you're, it would be hard if you were a writer who didn't have any representation and were coming up against this. It's tough because you do want to go, like, who else can you go to? Can you go to the top brass? Can you go to a producer you're working with? To be quite honest, I don't know if I have, other than pursuing more clarity, I don't know if I have the right perfect answer for you.
It makes sense, like having a third person to kind of step in and do the dirty work and be like, okay, let's dive deep into this.
And some of that is tied also to contracts and when things are due. So it's like, look, again, I've been through this of, they came in again, they did a full court press with the boss, my boss in attendance, and everyone was there. Was there something else manager going, is there something else you were looking for? Were you looking for a, full treatment or extent, trying to get what, if the executive isn't able to articulate it, trying to pull that out. I mean, that's what you're trying to do, is pull more out of if they're giving you flat, make it funnier. Like, how do you as a writer, unfortunately, have to work that much harder to sort of pull out of them going, do you want more satire? Do you want the dialogue to be funnier? What is it that you want funnier? So.
Cool. I love that. And this question goes for everybody. So Michael Shanker with Late Night, Garrick with Drive, Howard with all your amazing films, Onofri with Judy. When you're reading a project for the first time that leads to such success, can you tell almost right away that there's something special with it? Like we're in the process of reading it, you're like, oh, there's something special about this, whether it's connected to IP or something deeper, like an emotional connection.
I'll take this real quick since I have an interesting story, and it's in regards to Judy. We read, I think, the script for Judy a year prior, seeing a teaser in Berlin, and 1 or 2 people that read it said, no, it's just so depressing, and I don't want to see her like this, and I don't think people want to see this film. We actually passed on it. And I can't really remember if Renee was attached. She might have been, but we passed on it. And my boss, Mickey Liddell, and another distribution person was in Berlin, like, oh, they're showing a teaser. Let's see how it's turning out, because we read it. And of course, you see her performance. She's amazing. That's when they sent the teaser back to us in LA, and we all were flipping for it. So it was an interesting case that we'd passed previous. More things had come together. We saw what was happening, and then we jumped in. So it's always that story of, you never know. It's never dead. You never know what's going to happen. But we almost missed the boat on that one.
So what process did you come into the film? When it was in post, or?
No, they just had started filming, because it was only a 20-minute teaser. So I think they were filming the performance I think they did all performance first, because she actually sung, and in front of those audience members. They didn't record it, so it's actually her singing live.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So I think they really wanted to show that in Berlin. And then I can't remember what they needed more, probably distribution costs, and maybe they were going over budget, but we came in during production very early on to help with more funding, and then editing and all that. So, but we were in the early processes of production.
That was so cool. Anything else? Maybe with late night. Did you guys do I, Tonya too? Am I wrong?
We funded the distribution for I, Tonya, but we didn't develop it.
Okay.
But with Late Night, it was pretty much an undeniable thing. You know, we wanted to work with Mindy Kaling. It was a female-centric premise that had kind of never been done before, and I would say it was, you know, very competitive. My bosses had to go meet with Mindy and Nisha Ganatra and really pitch why we're the best home for the movie. And we were very lucky to win it because there was a lot of different companies vying for that package.
It was so big at Sundance. It was the biggest that year, I think.
Yeah.
Wow.
It was one of the biggest for sure.
That's so cool. Awesome.
I will say that something that's come up a couple times in conversation just for me the last few weeks, it speaks to what Howard had said about within the first few pages. It's the idea of, you know, when I read I Drive, it's my kind of thing. So it's also a series of things. I like noir. It's a sort of modern LA noir. That's my jam. It's very Michael Mann meets The Driver, which is a Walter Hill film from the late 70s. It's great. I knew that Ryan Gosling was going to be in it. Nick Refn was just about to sign on. It was Gosling saying, I want to choose a director. And ever since I saw Bronson, I was like obsessed with Nicholas Refn. That was the first time I saw him. So it was really a series of those elements and going, this is awesome. But it spirals out from, I like it, I'm getting more excited about it. I can see it, you know, by the end of certain projects. I'm not saying you can see yourself on the stage accepting an award, but it is the like, all done well. This is why I would want to make this movie, and it depends. Sometimes it's just a horror film, like a Final Destination, and that I also like a sort of concept-driven genre. So that I could see getting excited about. But something like a Call Me by Your Name or anything, to what I was going to say a moment ago is what moves you. You know what I mean? Where do the emotions, and some of that could be excitement. It can be more thrilling than it is. We always, I think emotional. You know, attachment is about sort of the sadness or the romance. Or, I mean, Call Me by Your Name is one of the most achingly beautiful films I've seen in years. But I think it's passion. It's when you start the seed that starts. It could start on page 1. It could start on page 5. But somewhere in the beginning, you're going to start to feel like this is something, and then you hope it blossoms into it's worth going for. It's going to win awards, or it's going to make at least its profit back, or what have you. But it is a sort of, you hope, and sometimes I hit a wall. Sometimes I get to page 60, 70, I go, not as blooming as I was hoped. But if you're reading something that within the first few pages you have that feeling, that's what you're sort of hoping for, and that's what you're following through on. So
every movie that I've ever made, you see me?
Yeah.
Every movie that I've ever made, and I've made a lot of them, 43 of them to be exact, I've had an emotional connection to. Father of the Bride. I did it because I was obsessed with Elizabeth Taylor when I was a kid, and she was in the original Father of the Bride. And that's why I was able to get the rights from Ted Turner at the time. Resurrection, a movie about someone, a female Christ figure. I was very, very interested in that emotionally. Gross Anatomy, about my years in medical school. And Call Me by Your Name was a book. And when I read the book, I don't know if you've all seen the movie, but there's a scene in the book where the father realizes what's going on, and he sits his son down and says, treasure this moment. It's the only time you're ever going to have a first love. I wish I had done it when I had the chance. It's a very moving moment in the book, and it's an even more moving moment in the movie. But I bought the book because of that moment, because my father was not like that with me when I came out. It was a different era, and it was a different thing, but my father was not like that with me. And I said to myself, everyone's going to want a father like that, and it'll make my movie Transcend. I knew that we had something special, but when I saw the cut 2 years ago in August, it was so staggering to me that I wrote a very, very long letter to the director. And the letter adumbrated in the future exactly what all the critics said. And then we showed it at Sundance. We finished it in September, but we waited till February to show it. We showed it at Sundance, and there was a 12-minute standing ovation. And I knew, woo, this is going to be a ride.
Oh my God, like, why am I crying? Like, I love that moment. I literally have goosebumps all over my body. It's like, it's crazy. Yeah, that's so cool. I mean, I feel like it's so, I mean, we talked about this a lot yesterday with the panelists yesterday. It's so much about perspective. It's so much about the emotion of the characters. And I feel like sometimes writers will want to create a concept just because they think it'll be cool, but it lacks any kind of perspective and point of view. And it's very clear when that happens. It's like, why are you personally invested in it? Why did you want to write this in the first place? So I think that what you all pretty much touched on that as well. Let me ask, so for writers trying to get their scripts out there, what do you feel is the first step? Should they try to get a manager first? Should they try to get a producer on board first? Obviously, maybe they wouldn't go to maybe a financier right away, or maybe they should. What advice would you give a writer that what should be their first step in getting their script out there to get it going?
Well, it's very advantageous to get a manager if you can. It's very hard to get a manager. An agent you don't need now because of what's going on. But get your script out there. If your dog walker's barber's manicurist is a friend of Brad, then go to your dog walker and ask him to give the script to the manicurist so he can get it to Brad Pitt. Any way you could do it, you do it. Attach it. I have a thing called the warm body principle. So even when I have a treatment, I attach an actor. That actor will never do the script, but it moved the project along to the next step. And that's the most important thing for a producer, is get it to the next step. Move it along ruthlessly so that you can get your movie made no matter how.
And Howard, let me ask you, for somebody who's like often gets a script from the very beginning and has to do so much hustling and so much pushing, how do you stay so relentless?
You have to have passion. You have to have passion for the material. If you're a producer and a writer and a director, if you have passion for the material, no one can stop you. I'm the kind of guy that I like it when people say no. They say no to me and I say, really? Fuck you. And that's what I do. Because my father was a bully and I learned how to out-bully bullies. And so it's all about getting up on the horse. You are thrown off, getting back up on that horse, thrown off, getting back up on that horse. It's all about getting back up on the horse. It's not about science. It's about tenacity and passion. That's all that it's about. And what separates the people who are successful is the people who are unsuccessful don't get up on that fucking horse.
I feel like I'm back in New York with my Italian family right now.
I hope there's nobody offended at my language.
No. It's all good. It's great. So let's, I guess, writers, if you want to start typing in questions, I have a few more, but then I'll start asking your questions. So what is your biggest pet peeve when you read a script? We talked a lot about what you like about the script, perspective, kind of the human connection, but is there anything in the script when you're reading a script that you just kind of, whether it's stereotypes or whatever?
I will say one that is probably a little bit controversial, but things that feel too zeitgeisty and come from dispassion, meaning I can tell whether it's, I remember reading a bunch of things right after Saw, and it was people, you could tell, and I even had a manager tell me this, just write something like Saw, quick, one location or two, bunch of people put together, and it just felt dispassionate and very like calculated. Now, that is done well. I myself have tried to copy certain successes because I like those movies, less about the money they made, more about like, oh, I wish I could come up with something as cool as, I don't know. Again, Final Destination. I think there's such a great gimmick and structure involved in that. But by that I mean, in the modern landscape, there's just things that feel too Me Too or too, anti-Trump. You can put all those things in a movie, but I mean, look at what's been nominated this year for that matter. And I think movies like Parasite that speak to economics and class difference by being also a very entertaining horror thriller. But I think when I read things that feel like they're just so on the nose, they're just so calculated to grab you because that's what we and Hollywood are talking about this week or this month, or you just have to be careful with that. I think it really goes to your talent as a writer, and are you doing it out of, and I know so many of you, like, I am a woman of color and I do have a story that I want to tell, and you should, but I just feel like there's sometimes I'll read a script and be like, this is so trying to be such and such with, this character who's clearly patterned after AOC, or, just things that are too calculated and have no real passion and intelligence behind them.
I completely agree. I feel like when I hear pitches, and especially when after the Trump administration came into office and everybody was like, well, now's the perfect time for my script. Now's the perfect time for my script. And it almost, or like when gay marriage became legal, it almost like undercuts the importance of a movement to be like, well, it benefits me because of my script has this too. And it kind of, I totally agree with you. It kind of loses that authenticity a little bit. Cool. Anything else?
You have to care about your lead characters. The biggest problem in movies is that you don't care about the characters, and immediately. If you care about them, you can go on the journey with them. I cared about the Joker. I cared about Judy. I cared about the poor folk in Parasite. It's all about that. You have to create a character that the audience can have empathy with and cares for, and that's the prime thing for me.
I love that.
One little pet peeve that I have when I'm reading, and this is a little more granular, is when the writer is trying to be overly clever and sort of is putting jokes into the exposition that wouldn't necessarily translate to on screen, and there's no way to show them on screen, and it's more of like a message directly from the writer to me. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
There was a movie a couple of years ago on Netflix. I'm sure people saw. It was called The Babysitter, and self-explanatory. Kid's being babysat by his older neighbor, and she turns out to be in a cult and wants to kill the kid. Of course, when we find this out, and when I read the script, I'm like, no, see, that's not going to happen. It actually said on the page, in one page, bold, "What the fuck?" That was the script page, and I'm like, is that a line? Is that actually? And actually, I had to watch the movie for it. They actually did that in the movie, but it was also even more of a like. So we cut out of the movie, and that's just on screen now. Like, no, that's not writing. And I know you think that's clever and interesting to the reader, but again, like you guys were saying, I caught it right away. I'm like, no, first of all, it's one more page of paper you wasted, but that's not storytelling to me. And I can't stand that either. Don't be clever where you're thinking you're being cute, and I'm going to like that.
Yeah,
exactly.
I actually just noticed someone just wrote a Shane Black comment, and I actually learned how to write a lot from reading Shane Black. But I think what you need, and just for anyone that doesn't know, he'll write things like, all right, strap in, this is where it gets exciting, you will not believe what's about to happen, that kind of thing. And it was I mean, it's Shane Black. If you've ever seen Shane Black's movies, they're very elevated comic book, meaning a production value and a very B story, but he writes in a way that it is passionate, it's fun, it's comic book, and I don't think he would write a Schindler's List in that way. So you just have to understand that it's all about finding, as Howard said, find your voice, and your voice sometimes means it isn't copying Shane Black. I learned structure and fun and that kind of thing, but that's not necessarily how I'm going to write my scripts. And you have to learn the value of that, and maybe even what the script is. If it's snakes on a plane, maybe it does mean you're you're talking about tone in your writing. But I think by and large, if you're trying to be what a couple of these guys said, don't be too clever by half. If you think you're being a bit of a smart ass, you might want to question that. Just the last thing you want to do is tick off the these gentlemen with myself that are reading and be like, well, no, you're trying to be too clever. I have too much to do today. I close your script and put you aside. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So just be careful of trying to, you're trying to impress and dare the reader a little bit too much. But it's a fine line. But don't be too clever by half, by any means. So.
I love that. And kind of echoing what you said about tone, I know, Howard, you've said before in panels that before you do anything in a script, you have to figure out what the tone is, which I thought was really great because everything kind of blossoms from the tone that you're trying to get across, which I think was also very astute. Okay, last question for me, and then enough about my questions. We'll go into the writer's questions. What is pitching advice? A lot of what we do at Roadmap is helping writers with their pitches. What advice would you give a writer that's going out with their first pitch or trying to fine-tune their pitches?
I teach pitching at USC and I teach pitching at Brooklyn College, and it's a 5-month course. So if you want to learn about pitching, it takes 5 months. But I'll give you one more advice. Less is more. Keep it short, because the executives don't have the time or the attention span, and get them at the beginning. If you get them with that first sentence of a pitch, get them going, 12 minutes, finish. That's the way I do it.
Yeah, I love that.
I completely agree with that.
Cool.
Yeah, let me tell you from a couple times that I have done it, less is more. I had a 30-something minute comedy pitch once. It was one of the most painful things I've ever done as a human and as a writer. Awful. Just less is more. Make them ask you questions, actually. I mean, it's a fine balance as anything. But if you get to the end and they have, the job where she works, tell me a bit more about the park. What does that look like? You want them to ask that rather than being like, yeah, is this over? I think I get. If you start getting glazed eyes and losing people, it's awful. I've been there. It is painful. So less is more. I agree.
And I'll say, I guess, just rehearse and be prepared. I know it seems probably obvious and common sense, but there is a difference. I had a couple writers in on Friday, and they were great writers and great ideas, but they were reading from their iPad. And I know it's tough to memorize and even get time to rehearse, but when you're talking to me, as opposed to like in an iPad and at me, I'm not as engaged. So, and if it's got to be shorter for that reason, do it. Be rehearsed and get in my eyes and tell me that story. Because it's going to be hard for me to love your story if you're looking down at a screen. Rehearse with someone, and it's your story. You should know it.
Yeah.
That's very, very valuable, what Michael just said. It's very important to rehearse. And if you don't have charisma, get a partner that has charisma. Okay? And rehearse it. Rehearse it a million times. Every pitch that I've ever pitched, I rehearsed with Carol Baum 150 times to get it right. And each time I change something or add something. And so that's a very good piece of advice.
Cool. I love that. Actually, I've attended one of Howard's, it was a one-day event. It was like talking about pitching and his story and stuff like that. So I highly suggest if Howard's teaching a class, wherever it is, that you attend. It's very engaging and important. And cool, I guess, and very last question, I lied, for me. So like for Garrick, you were saying you were like listening to a horrible pitch, or I'm sure you've all.
I was the one pitching.
Oh, you were the one pitching. Oh, okay, great. So okay, this is great then. So for you, if you're pitching and you feel like it's not going well, do you like? I think sometimes people, I mean, everybody gets in their head, but sometimes when they stop themselves, it's too premature. It's like, oh no, you're actually doing a good job, keep going. How does a writer know, and how can they maneuver out of maybe a bad pitch or when they're just too in their head and they want to stop?
I think Howard should take that for sure, but I won't put that on him. But for me, I just knew I knew it was long, and my telling of it was longer and more painful. And you just look at the people's faces, and it was like, I just got to get out of this quickly. But I'm sure Howard has a better perspective.
Repeat that question, Joey.
Yeah. So what do you do when you're hearing a pitch or when you're in a pitch and it's just not going well? The execs are clearly not engaged. Like, do you start talking about a different element of the script? You talk about your personal connection to it, or should the writer, like, how should they maneuver out of trying to get?
That's a good idea to talk about your personal connection. What I always advise people in pitching when they get into the room with the executives, have a few bullshitting moments and conversing back and forth. Find an area of commonality. Did you go to the same college? Did you grow up in the same community? Do you know this one? Create a situation so that you and he can connect together. And once you do that and he's paying attention, if you're in a very, very bad way, he'll stop you and say, I can't go on. I do that all the time. When they read from their iPad and they're droning on and on and on and on, I say, okay, thanks, next.
Yeah.
I don't have the time to, if people don't have the concern to hone a pitch, it's like a play, it's like a movie. You've got to make that pitch theatrical and dramatic and pointed and short.
Mm-hmm. I love that. Less is more. Seems like a good consensus. Cool. Okay, so I'm going to go into questions from everybody, all the writers on now. I think for now we have enough questions to take us to the end. So no more questions, please. From Janet, when Howard said he has an actor at the treatment stage, does he mean that the actor is someone that he has in mind, but that person is unattached and just an idea?
No, I mean that the person is attached. A warm body principle. You have a treatment with Brad Pitt attached. Okay, you have a treatment with, and it could be a much lesser actor. Okay, you could. When I made the main event, before all of you were born, a movie with Barbra Streisand and Ryan O'Neal, I attached Susie Blakely, who the actor that was in Rich Man, Poor Man. I forget his name, but Peter Strauss, I think. I attached those two to a treatment and was able to sell it to MGM.
Wow.
Eventually, they didn't do it. And I got it to Barbara, and Barbara did it, who then was the biggest star in the world. But the warm body principle is such, you attach a warm body, no matter who it is, to an idea, to a treatment, to a book, to a comic book, to a screenplay especially. And that's what I do.
I love that. Cool. Why, this is from Bill, why when the conventional wisdom is that period pieces are so hard to get made, are 4 or 5 of the best picture nominees period pieces?
Well, the one thing I would say about that is, in having at Braun, we did many, to the point where the boss was like, we can't do any more of these period pieces. They're expensive. They can sometimes have a very limited audience. I mean, obviously you're speaking to period pieces that I think are, I'll take Little Women, I think is an amazing adaptation, beautiful film. And that film, why do we need another Little Women? Well, beyond all the obvious optics, it really is, it's a wonderful blend of contemporary and period, and I think is feminist and speaks to a lot of what's happening there's a conversation between Saoirse and Meryl Streep about what a woman has to do, be married, be rich, be this, be that. I think it couldn't be any more important, couldn't be any more timeless, but I think using period as a reflective lens, that's what we always did at Braun Studios. It was always about, if we're making a movie about civil rights, or it takes place in the Civil War era, or it takes place in the 1980s, it's Bombshell, which took place 5 to 10 years ago.
Oh.
It's a movie that holds a mirror up to where we're at now, and hopefully can at least show you what this time and this place and this event was like, and as well, if you're doing your job right, obviously as a writer, you're using a mirror reflectively with themes, with subject matter, things that you might not even be able to tackle now, things that people might not want to go see in a theater right now. Trump, this is a little much, but if I see a Little Women, if I see a Parasite, if I see Joker, I mean, these movies are all mirrors to society. So I think that is I'll be frank about it, I think that is almost the only way to get period movies made, unless you're a big director and you have, I can't even say Brad Pitt necessarily anymore, and you want to do, not Master and Commander, but you understand what I'm saying, a big movie with big scope and it's period, it's hard. It really has to, it almost has to be like a 2 or 3 night event or a stars show. But I think that's the answer is you know, mirror to society kind of a vibe.
I love that. Cool. This is from anonymous attendee. Do you prefer to read / produce scripts that's original or based on popular IP? I mean, I feel like probably IP is the preferred, but I feel like all of you have done one way or the other original content before.
I prefer original content if I can get it. You know, Buffy the Vampire Slayer was very original. Call Me by Your Name was very, very original. Every movie I've made, I've made some from IP, but not a lot. You know, because I was a struggling young producer. No one would give me the best script, so I had to create my own out of my own head, and so I did. And that's how I got started. So I like original content.
I love that. Cool. Okay. Any other thoughts about just IP in general from anybody?
I think that there's sort of a built-in value with certain pre-existing IP in the sense of that if it's a successful book, then you sort of already have a built-in audience for the movie. So in a way, IP is obviously good, but at the same time, you know, I'm reading it kind of agnostic of where it came from and just looking at the quality of the content at the end of the day.
Let me ask you, because or anybody really, because I know sometimes writers will be like, okay, I'm not getting traction with the script. Let me write a book or let me write a graphic novel because that'll be IP and that'll help get things going. But in your opinion, what would you consider valuable IP? Like an Amazon bestseller, a graphic novel that's won some awards, a certain amount of units, just maybe as general or as specific as possible. What would you consider valuable IP?
I would say anything that Oprah or Reese picks for their book clubs is very valuable. Anything that sells for big money in publishing and has a huge initial release and push by a major publisher that you kind of know ahead of time that it has a really good chance of being a bestseller. And then obviously sort of the things that are on top of the New York Times bestsellers list and just things like Harry Potter, sort of like the obvious things. And, you know, Amari and the Night Watchers is going to be a big one that's coming soon. Just anything that has sort of a commercial concept at the center that has all the kind of components that are guiding it towards success.
Cool. Yeah, that makes sense. I read everything Reese says to read. I'm like, yes, Reese, whatever you say. And she's so good. It's really good choices. This is from Joni. Any advice repitching an ensemble piece, for example, maybe a rom-com, especially in regards to talking about stakes? Focus on a few key characters, but if, I guess she's saying, if you do focus on a few key characters, you'll lose out on the ensemble vibe. So I guess for anybody, well, how would you tell somebody to pitch an ensemble without it being too kind of convoluted and too many focus points?
I would say, I don't know if everyone will agree with this, but I would say perhaps you focus on one person's point of view to tell the story through, and then you color the ensemble around that one main character.
I mean, even with an ensemble, and I say this, you can have your ensemble pieces. There should be anyway one person who does stand out. And I mean, I even say this with American Pie. It's about teens in high school trying to have sex. But we have that one guy we're following more than anyone else. And it's Kevin. So to his point, there should be someone that see it through their eyes, even though everyone almost has the same standing. We need to follow one specific person. More so than the rest. You should focus on one more than anyone else.
That's very good advice that the two Michaels just gave. Very, very good advice, especially in the pitch. In the movie, you could do whatever you want, but in the pitch, in order to get them interested, that's what you have to do. Concentrate on one.
I love that. And by the way, I love that for a title of a movie, The Two Michaels. We have to all work together and get that done.
Do it. Two popes.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's the sequel. Okay, this is from another anonymous attendee. What strategy can a writer, and I think we talked about this before about the pitch or maybe just taking notes, but how should a writer take maybe a bad note, a note that they get from an executive that's developing their script or potentially going to produce their project, but they know deep down like, oh, this note is going to stay outside my vision. How would you suggest a writer open up that conversation? Because I think a lot of writers are afraid to, which I totally understand. But I guess in your perspective, being on the other side of the table, what has happened when you've had that conversation with the writer, and how much should that writer kind of fight back?
If it's a bad note, ignore it, okay? But then when you hand in the script and you have a meeting about it, defend your position, have arguments so that you can convince the executive that your way is right and his way isn't right, okay? I made a movie recently, actually, where I needed finishing funds. So the financier said, I'll give you $40,000 to finish, and then let me see the movie again. And then I'll give you another $360,000 to finish the movie. The director didn't follow one note. Guess what? We didn't get the $360,000 because she was stupid and ridiculous, and she's never going to have a career. Sorry.
Got it. So it's about being amendable a little bit and taking a few notes. Yeah, finding the balance.
I have a friend who just told me the other day that he knew in his heart that an avenue he was going down with the executives, very much like, we're all clear this is what we're doing, even though I've argued this. And sure enough, did the draft, new regime has come in, new voices have come in. He lost a couple people he had originally signed on with and developed this project with. And those two new people came in and said, hey, right away, why are you going down this route? And the writer felt vindicated, but also like, look, I sometimes you have to, as Howard just said, and I don't know the circumstance, but sometimes you do have to do those notes. Sometimes you do have to try, defend your position and try because you're under contract or because that's what the executive or producer or studio asks. Now, if it turns out wrong, you try not to tap dance and be like, I told you so, but that does happen. And sometimes you really have to, I think Howard's advice for defending and then going with the flow in terms of, you gotta, if they're paying the bill and they want to see the lead, is now a male and we're gonna try this, you either can quit or you can try that and do the best you can. But sometimes you're gonna do things that, as a writer, that you just know in your gut is not right. But it would take longer than we have time to explain, how to get out of that. But it does happen. Sometimes you just have to, it's hard to stand your ground, and it's hard to go down an avenue you just know in your gut is not, it's broken somehow, but it happens.
Cool. I love that. There's a lot of questions, but this is gonna be the last question because I want to do just one quick roundup with everybody. So this is from Scott. What is your biggest turnoff during general meetings with writers? I guess maybe even go broader than that. What advice would you give a writer when they're going on a general meeting?
Don't wear flip-flops.
Nobody should ever. Yes. Okay. That's a good one.
Don't wear hats. Okay. And look at the executive. Make eye contact with him. It's very important that he knows that you're alive. If you're busy reading from your phone or your iPad, he can't see you, okay? Memorize it, rehearse it, and be convivial.
Love that.
And going along with what Howard said, I would also say just come in being more than just a writer. Be a fully formed human being and be prepared to have a little, BS conversation at the beginning and just sort of add some light in the air in the room and add some levity to the conversation so it's not so serious and stuffy, and just to get people's guards down right when you kind of come in the door.
Mm-hmm. I love that.
And to do that, I would say do your research on the person. I mean, we're all over the place on the internet. So whoever I'm meeting, doesn't matter if I'm a writer or an executive and the other person, I look them up as much as possible, try to find out where have they worked before, do we have any mutual friends, where did they go to school? For that reason, it's going to be easier to start the conversation. Oh, I saw blah, blah, blah. I saw you went to so-and-so university. And that's how the ball gets rolling. Do your research, and you're not just a writer. Now you are a person, and you're having a conversation which will organically start your business that you're to discuss.
Yeah.
That's brilliant advice. Very good.
Yeah. It's something I tell the writers all the time. You're a human first and a writer second, especially when you're going into these meetings, because nobody wants somebody like, hey, how are you? Good, I wrote this script and that script and this script and that script. It's like, whoa, calm down. Like, how was your day? How was the weather? How was your drive over here? Let's take a moment. And I think it's important, even with screenwriting in general, if you want to provide escapism in one way or the other. And I think with the general meeting, the exec doesn't want to be inundated right away with more pitches and more stories. They want to just have that moment to breathe and just get to connect with somebody on a human level, which just goes right to your scripts as well. Cool. Okay, so let's just go around really quickly. One last question for all of you. And I hate this question. I know it's very general, but I also love asking it. I don't like being asked it. I love asking it. Is what advice would you give an up-and-coming writer? If there's one that stands out, or if there's a couple, just pick one. What advice would you be like, I wish I knew this when I was starting out, or recurring advice you give to people that you meet, the writers that you meet?
I want to say it's kind of twofold for me. It's be open and network. So I think we all look at ourselves as artists first, like you said, but you have to know, I was an actor for many years too, and I wish I knew this then as well. You can go to all your classes, you can go to as many shows as you want. You need to know people, and you're not going to get you could have the best script in the world and be the best actor in the world. If no one knows you, it doesn't matter. So you have to say yes to drinks, to parties, to writers groups, because you don't know where it's going to lead. So yeah, you have to network and make connections, because you don't know where the dots are connect. And that's by saying yes to everything. So yes, be writing as much as possible. You have to do that. If you don't know the person to get your stuff out there, then it doesn't matter.
Oh, agreed. Agreed.
Well, what writers do is write. So if you have a screenplay, write a screenplay. And then if it's rejected, write another screenplay. And then if that is rejected, write another screenplay. Writers write. That's all you have to do. And then get a manager.
Love that. Cool.
My advice sort of echoes the last two people pretty exactly, but I would say, kind of going along with what Howard just said, always be writing, and don't obsess over one script. You know, like, your script's never going to be perfect, and don't just work all the time on one thing over a period of months or years. Move on to something new, get something into the best shape that you possibly can, while also obviously networking, like Michael said, and just always be coming up with new ideas and have ideas ready to pitch wherever you go.
Cool, love that.
Michael's, the first Michael that spoke's advice is incredibly good. I wish, I tend to be a person who's kind of a introverted extrovert kind of a thing. I don't love parties. I don't love that kind of thing. It's incredibly important. You can't just be a writer not in the world. And it really is, to Howard's point about warm bodies, you need somebody who's going to give you a validation, a hand. Everything I've ever done has been a recommendation from a friend, someone who likes me, someone who trusts me, someone who knows my work. So you have to network, even if it's your least favorite thing to do. You've got to put yourself more and more into it. And writer-wise, the thing I would say is finish it. I spent a number of years, 40 pages, put it in a drawer, 60 pages, put it in a drawer, 80 pages, rewrote it, stuck it, so finish something. And that accomplishment alone will tell you, where you need to go next, rather than always drifting from an idea to an idea. Although I do agree, focusing on one idea for 5 years is not good advice. So.
Yeah, for sure.
You have to have an output. So to that point, one script in 5 years, great, someone loves your stuff. What else you have? Oh, I have nothing else. This is what I've been. You have to be constantly, you have to show that you can produce material. So yeah, like Howard said, do the next thing and do the next thing. You have to have a library to show people, so you're not just one trick pony.
Yeah. Awesome. This was so inspiring, so fantastic. I still have goosebumps. Michaels, Garrick, Howard, thank you so much for this. I know the writers really appreciated it too. anybody who has skin in the game tonight, good luck. And thank you, everybody, for sharing your wisdom. And thank you, writers, for joining us this Sunday morning. I guess Sunday afternoon at this point. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday, and then we'll talk soon.
Right. Great, everyone. Right on.
Right on. Bye, everybody. See ya.
Bye.